Afternoon. Afternoon. Okay, good afternoon again. So I won't waste your time anymore. No? The others can follow. Hopefully, more will follow later on. Sige. So we're still on Module 4, Agrarian Reform and Public Finance. Okay. So before that, it will be a short session. No? I don't expect this class to reach an hour and a half. So again, good afternoon. A few announcements for your classmates who are not able to attend. Again, I record this and I post this usually at the end of each session by the next day. So by tomorrow or maybe by tonight, depends. So again, suggested pace, cover module 4 by April 30. All of them, no? It gets shorter as you go along. No? So agrarian reform, they're the longest. Finance is relatively long, becomes shorter when you talk about population demography. Then finally, the shortest one is the role no, of private sector in development. Uh, and then again, go back to my synchronous session 2 weeks ago, or yeah, 2 weeks ago when I discussed or last week, when I discussed the guidelines for homework number 2. Then cover module 5 from April 30 to May 14. Um, that will be the last module. That's very short, no, but very practical. No? And I'll try to come up with a more interactive exercise on that. So no synchronous class during Holy Week on April 12. We still have one next week. The class period on April 26 will be devoted to consultations. Now, what I've started doing since last semester is, since it's a semester-long class, I'm devoting the one class before one class before the deadline, for your homework too, for consultations. So I'll come up with a sign up sheet, Google Doc, sign up Google Doc sheet soon. First come, first serve. No? But it's optional. I mean, I think others have found it useful before. No? So we'll do that. No? So last semester, I had two classes again. No? For one class, all of them did consultations. For the other class naman, only 2 or 3 out of the 5 or 6 groups. So it's really up to you. No? Tigta 20 minutes lang. So that's for assignment 2. I'll send that soon. And then May 17, that's your study days week or study days for 3 days. No, will be done actually before that. No? So I'll just be online in case any of you would like to ask me anything about the course content, anything about development work, career options, career advice, etc. etc. Wag lang love life. Ask me anything perhaps except love life. Beyond. So announcements. All right. So just in case you have questions, no, just let me know. But we can proceed, I think. No? So agriculture, we covered agriculture last week, no, except agrarian reform, because I really was hoping that you guys have covered it before I discuss it, no, para mas interactive. So anyone? So what is the CARP? What is the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program? What is CARPer as well? Anyone who would like to just recap for us? No, very quickly, what exactly is CARP? No? If you were to describe it in a sentence or two, what is it? What is CARP? Anyone from the group? There's only 7 of you, no? Anyone who can summarize for us what is it all about?
Sir.
Go ahead, Dieter.
It's a reform law. It's a comprehensive agrarian reform law. Is that?
Yeah, but what did it try to achieve, or what is it trying to achieve? Because it's still being implemented now.
It's to help like beneficiaries, like for small independent farmers, sir.
Okay, you're on the right track now. So it's really geared towards the farmers. No? The main, what do you call this? The main objective of the law really was to, it's synonymous now when people say agrarian reform, it's synonymous to land reform. So what the objective was, they tried to distribute land. It was trying to solve inequality in terms of assets. No? So they were dividing up the really large land sizes. No? They started with rice and corn back in the day, no? Before the law was implemented. No? So they tried through some presidential orders, tried to distribute lands in rice and corn. So basically, farmers before, they were just tenants. No? So it's the same. No? If you think about landlord-tenant relationship, no? Similar to what you have in apartments. No? Some of you are renting apartments. No? So the landlord owns the property and the tenant just uses the land, no? Either for residential purposes or for business purposes. So in the case of agriculture before and even up to now, no? The tenants are the ones stealing the land. No? In a sense, sort of like employees, no? But really not. No? Parang taxi yan. No? They use the land, no? To plant and then to harvest things, and then the landlord gets a share. But with the land reform, with the agrarian reform in 1987 or 98, no? 1988, no? If I remember correctly, no? They basically covered all lands. Basically, all lands, big lands, no, anyone except for certain exemptions, no, all lands above 5 hectares, no, will have to be distributed to the farmers. So the farmers each got 3 to 5 hectares of land, no? And some communities, no, they had larger land sizes, no, but it was a common title. So it was, the objective was, if you think about it, really noble, no? The poor, no, the farmers before who were just stealing the land, now they have their own land. They own the land. They just don't do business or are not just working on the fields, but they have their own land. So that was the main objective. But of course, for a fee, no, the again, remember, no, the guidance we have, no, for any type of government intervention, don't make it free, sana, no, to the extent possible. So this basically gave the farmers, the poor farmers, land, no, 3 to 5 hectares, but they had to pay, no? But it was, long term, 20, 30 year lease amortization, no. And then there were some loans, no, provided by land bank, so they have to pay that back to land bank. So that, in a nutshell, was CARP. No, they had targets, no, and CARPer is basically just an extension, no, of CARP, because CARP was supposed to end in 2010, if I'm not mistaken, or thereabouts, but it got extended. But Congress, because it's a law, no, you had to create another law to extend it, which is now the CARPer. So that's the whole be all and end all of CARP. Tell me now what you have learned, no, while you were, if you were actually paying attention to Module 4, no, the agrarian reform part. No? So given that premise, no, even if you haven't covered it, what do you think are the pluses and the minuses, the pros and cons of CARP? No? It has been implemented since you guys were born, no? So late 80s up to now, no? And they're still doing it. They're still trying to finish, no? Because they still have to distribute lands to the farmers, no? As per the law. What have you learned? No? What are some of the benefits, the pros and cons of CARP based on what you've read or what you think would be the benefits? Anyone? Or you haven't gone that far yet? Okay. Some evidence points to better land productivity, sir, of CARP. Okay. We'll see, no, whether that's correct statement. Anyone else? So it seems no one has in the group, no, has covered this yet. Okay, so I'll just proceed, no. And I hope, no, again, the point of SOCSI 13 really and online learning is you learn more from the material on Canvas. I know you guys are busy. You're probably juggling 5 to 6 classes, but the synchronous sessions are just supposed to summarize, not just me, no, but tulungan tayo to help summarize for everyone. No? So, and really the bulk of the learning happens on Canvas. That's the way it's structured. No? Of course, if we're doing this face to face, no, it's different. No? It will be me, will be the main source. No? Of course, based on the readings that I assign. So, yeah, I hope you're catching up, no, with the lectures, no? With the material on Canvas. No? So sige. So just based on what I have also posted on Canvas, no. So I wanted you guys to cover it before this class kasi some of it might be a bit technical, no, but and it will be easier, no, for you to follow if you sort of digested it a bit. Pero sige lang. On the plus side, no, there were some studies, no, and even articles that pointed to lower poverty rates. No? If you compare agrarian reform beneficiaries, the farmers who got a piece of land, no, versus their similar counterparts who did not get anything. No? So there were studies from Dr. Celia Reyes and PIDS, Dr. Habito as well, and De Leon, etc., etc. And positive is the poor have an asset. Diba? As we discussed in module, I think, 2, no? Part of trying to address vulnerabilities, having assets. No? The more that one, especially the poor, can accumulate assets, the better. No? So that in itself is already good because, in a sense, that sort of is better than not having assets. Diba? And the poor, no, especially in the beginning and even up to now, they're provided with support services. No? So what do you need to to make better use of your land. No? So inputs like fertilizers, no seeds, and even some shared equipment, no, from the DA, no, tractors and whatnot, no. So yun, that's the positive. No? But if you'll see, no, there were more negatives, no. The intent was noble, no? And if you think about it, parang wow, ganda ng program, no, to solve inequality. But actually, there were a lot of negatives as well. And some would argue, many would argue, especially those objective researchers and analysts would argue there have been more negatives. No? So actually, there were some, no, especially Dr. Raul Fabella, who's also a national scientist, the only economist who is a member of the National Academy of Sciences, the only economist who's actually a national scientist. He actually questioned some of the methodological issues, no, that supported the conclusions that, you know, there were poverty reductions, no? Because he was saying, no, the counterfactuals used by the researchers, no, may not be comparable to the agrarian reform beneficiaries. So basically, you just have to remember, kini-question niya the whether really, no, the differences were real, no, or maybe there were some methodological errors. You guys are studying econometrics, no? Sometimes the methodology can have an impact on the findings. The methodological errors can, in fact, no, negate the findings that you have. The problem with CARP, no, is, again, as I mentioned to you, the land was not given for free. It was given to the poor, but they had to pay back, no? On loan yun, in a sense, no? Parang meron silang mortgage, no? They had to pay land bank, no, every so often, no. So there were constraints on the use, no. Well, the constraints, no, the primary constraint was you can't first, no, once you get your land, no, you can't lease it or rent it out for the next 10 years, no. Plus, it can go longer, no, if you haven't paid your loan. So you have to pay your loan first before you're able to lease it out. And you cannot use your land as collateral, di ba? Ask your parents, no, whenever someone, not just in the agri sector, no, in the urban areas as well, no, whenever you apply for a loan in the bank, for example, no, usually the first thing they ask is for a collateral, and collateral usually is the fixed asset, which is land. Ang problema, no, they can't even, you know, ito yung isa pang negative about CARP, no, the constraints they put, no, was that you can't use that as a collateral, no, to get funding, to borrow from the bank. So medyo hirap ka, no? So sayang, no? There are constraints, no? So it's not as flexible as you would want it to be. Maraming restrictions, no? And it forced people to be entrepreneurs kasi you're given land, oh, make it productive, ah. And what if they're not really entrepreneurs? What if they're just happy with, you know, a small piece of land, or just happy being tenants because they're not entrepreneurs? No? So they now, the CARP program actually generated a new class called the landed poor. No? They have land, no? But the problem with that is they have the asset, but they're not really entrepreneurial, so they can't maximize it. And at the same time, they want to lend it or to they want to lease it or to rent it out, but they could not because there were constraints, no? So naging landed poor sila, diba? So again, back to our lesson last week, no? You can't force everyone, no? And this is my point, no, when I was checking the homework, no? You can't force everyone to be entrepreneurs. Sometimes hindi talaga. Like ako, I cannot. You give me like a program, no? You enroll me in a program for entrepreneurs. Ako takot ako magnegosyo. Then it's not for everyone. Those constraints and those realities actually led to indebtedness. Kasi nga, it's not free. Therefore, you know, some of them who are not able to maximize the land, no, the landed poor, no, they were still supposed to pay government back, no, for the piece of land. And ang problema, they're not generating enough income. They're still poor, no? So they could not, no? So patong-patong lang, no? All the more that land bank will impose interest, you accumulate loans plus interest, etc. So vicious cycle siya. And here's the important thing, no, which I sort of introduced last time, no. The problem with carp, no, not just from the farmer side, no, from the sectoral side, no, from the agriculture sector's perspective, it led, no, because you broke up the land, the pieces of land. Fragmentation led to agri-productivity loss. It actually disincentivized investment. Kasi nga, a lot of agribusiness companies or people who are the entrepreneurs, no, parang they shunned away from it kasi parang we can't invest there kasi ang liit ng lupa, no? Even for example, the farmers are now able, no, they paid off their debts, they're now able to lease it out, no? Parang tentative yung investors because it's only a small piece of land, no? The crops I want to grow, no, need larger than 3 or 5 hectares. So it goes against economies of scale. This is from the paper, no, Capital Flight, from the paper of Dr. Fabella. They noticed, no, in many areas where carp was introduced, no, especially in the Negros area, for example, they noticed that the financial institutions actually, instead of, kasi akala mo, oh, people would have income kasi they would have an asset, ganun, ganun. You think people would be more affluent. You think they will incentivize the financial institutions to come. Pero hindi, the opposite, they noticed the opposite happening. No? The capital, the financial institutions actually went out. Kasi yun nga, no? There's no money to be made. They can't accept collateral, they can't approve loans, walang incentive to the investors. So if you're a financial institutions, we're noticing that, you know, the people are not getting richer, the businesses are not coming, they're actually avoiding the area. You also avoid the area. You leave rather than stay. So they've noticed that capital flight. Now, Dieter, go ahead.
Sir, couldn't like the government provide amendment towards like or an additional policy that could provide assistance to farmers, like for example, like subsidizing subsidizing them in order like to the point where they could at least fend for themselves and to the point where it could interest investors in the future.
We'll get to that. No, that's the next part. No, but to answer the first part of your question, actually, carp, no, if you read the law, of course, it's a long law, and then you can consult primers. No, actually one of my teachers corrected me. The word we pronounce primer is actually pronounced as primer. No? As an aside lang. But you know, the carp was supposed to provide the farmers with the tools that they need, no, for growing. No, it was heavily subsidized, free seeds, free materials, free inputs, even free services. No? But again, given all of these issues, no, one, sometimes part of this also is the quality of land. Sometimes the land that they give out just to record it as an accomplishment, no, pangit yung land, no, or the farmers could not maximize the land because they're not entrepreneurs. They can only till part of it. They cannot borrow money to expand their production because of these constraints. No, even if government subsidize a lot of the inputs, many farmers still, you know, and in many cases, no, some farmers, no, they weren't competitive because yun nga, no, they only had a small piece of land. They could not compete with the likes of the haciendas, etc., or the large plantations who were exempted. May mga exemptions din, no? Or yun nga, hindi sila as efficient, no, because all of these different problems of carp by design, no, led to unproductivity. Kahit na government was heavily subsidizing a lot of the inputs. And we'll explore that more later. No? I have another slide for that. No? And yes, you're right. No, government can amend anything. laws can be amended. By the way, even the Constitution can be amended, although that's more difficult. Laws also, they're difficult, no, but they can be amended. So CARP was amended into CARPER to extend it, no? And to again, as you were saying, Dieter, no, to provide actually more services, free services or subsidized services. Pero to no avail because just by breaking it up, no, fragmenting it, and forcing entrepreneurship plus all of these constraints, no, led to more unproductive results. No.
Because, sir, from the looks of it, just as a third person perspective, it's very, you could say that the law is very shallow in terms of trying to implement something that needs like more in depth or more studies in order to actually aid farmers and and improve or develop agricultural sector.
That's a very good point because one of the problems with with policy making in the Philippines, sometimes they think, no, and these are what you call unintended consequences, no. Sometimes it's nauna yung heart rather than the head, no. Parang they think it's a noble thing, it's an ideal thing, but once they design the policies, bitin pala, or it's actually more destructive if they think about it, no. Kasi if you ask any farmer, no, if they have good relationships, hindi naman sila abuse, no, some of them would be happy being just tenants, no, or leasing their land. Ang problema, they can't even lease their land, no? So some of it is the core problem of CARP, no, fragmenting the land. But part of it also, and we'll get to that in the next few slides, no, are the constraints, no, that they put, no, that further actually made it problematic, no. Sabi nga nung iba, no, even if you push through with CARP, no, but did not put a lot of constraints on it, could have actually been more successful. But bottom line, the core problem also was the fragmentation. That's why if you read, no, Dr. Briones' paper on agri, on the back briefer on the agri sector, no, the declining productivity of the agriculture sector was really, correlated, highly correlated with CARP. The fragmentation, no, led agri-production to really go down, especially compared to our neighbors. So by in itself, no, the fragmentation led to less reduced productivity. No? Plus, naka-worsen pa yung constraints. No? We'll explore more later, no, in the next few slides. So another problem, as I was saying, no, was the quality of land. No? Alam niyo naman, sometimes government, kasi government is all about targets versus accomplishments. Gusto na ipagmayabang. The more numbers you can report, no, the better. So sometimes, just to meet higher numbers, no, they would just distribute any kind of land, kahit pangit yung land, even if it's not as productive. So that further contributed to unproductivity and landed poverty. And lastly, no, and we'll discuss this more later. No, there were issues also before. No, as I mentioned, no, in most cases they gave lands to individual families, but in some cases, no, they gave a larger piece of land to communities, to associations. Yung problema, number one, if they don't have social capital, mag-aaway-aaway lang sila about what to do with the land, no, or how to demarcate the land. No. Second, what to do with the land. Third, if they're now able to, let's say, lease it, ayaw nung iba, but ako, I want sana to make money by renting it out, but the others don't want. Damay-damay kayo. No? It's a group thing. So if the group says no, even if it's a good decision, then. So we'll discuss this later because DA right now, no, funded by the World Bank, funded by the World Bank, has a good program to address this problem. So the way, again, no, ito nga, no, going back, no, I wanted to copy, I copy pasted basically one of my slides before. No. The fragmentation itself became problematic. No, it was very romantic, no, to say the poor will have land, ganito, very romanticized yan. Pero unintended consequence was lack of productivity in the entire sector. So ito, no, just emphasizing further, no, what I've been telling earlier, no, as a response to Dieter. No. Now, what is the way forward for CARP? And these are some very wise suggestions, no, from really thought leaders, no, in my opinion. No. So if you want to learn more, no, you read the articles from Chikiamco, which I posted on Canvas, no, the Foundation for Economic Freedom, no, those guys, no, really solid. No. And if you ask agribusinesses, no, these are some important things. No. So one is debt condonation. Because again, no, the problem is as long as they have debt, no, they cannot be flexible. They cannot lease the land, even if there are interested agribusiness companies or even cooperatives for that matter. They cannot. So one is you condone the debt. Wala nang debt. No? As long as 10 years pa rin. Kasi important naman, no, na you still have some time between the receipt of the land, ownership of the land, and the opportunity to sell it. No? Maybe reduce it to 5 years. No? After 5 years, you can now do whatever you want. So you condone the debt kasi they were arguing the resources that it takes for land bank, for example, to run after farmers with past due amounts, no, the overheads, the resources it take, no, the transportation, the manpower, sayang lang. And if you think about it, they computed this, no, the total debt of all agrarian reform beneficiaries are very tiny. So cost benefit wise, pwede mo na i-condone yung debt. And then you give them the opportunity to maximize the land. No? Rent it out, sell it even if they want, no, to come together, no. Maraming pwedeng gawin. That's one. That's one very important. And these are suggestions, and I agree with these, no. Some may not, no, especially those who are very, very passionate about, the farmers still owning and tilling their own land. So may debate dito. There's an ongoing debate. But read all of the resources I provided on Canvas on this. It's very useful for your understanding. And the second here is this addresses the ARB versus ARC. No? Again, as I told you, no, some got lands for their families, individual titles, yung iba as communities. No? Again, to give more flexibility, they're now trying to parcel out the lands that went to agrarian reform communities. So ipa-parcel out nila, let's say 100, let's say 50 families there. No? So they will parcel out the piece of land into 50 individual titles. No? Again, it's called split. No, it stands for something. So it's a nice acronym. Very appropriate. Again, the way forward for CARP really is, yes, you give the poor an asset, no, give them all the flexibility. They can do what they want with that land. They can rent it out, lease it out, sell it, whatnot. Use them for collateral so they can borrow money for something, no? Whether to use that on the land or for other productive uses in the countryside. Kasi mali mo, they want to do something else, no? But they can use that land as collateral. So maraming pwede to solve poverty. The point here, the recommendations from the thought leaders is give them maximum flexibility by removing the constraints, removing the debt that has tied them, no? And then, parcelize everything. Parcelize everything. Give maximum flexibility to everything. So that's a short summary of CARP, the issues, and the way forward, no? Which I agree with. No? But not everyone agrees, by the way. No? Not all SOCSI 13 professors might agree with this. But for me, I agree with this. Because for me, don't force the farmer to maximize the land by himself. If the farmer, the family can sell it, lease it, use it for collateral, so be it. Give them options. Huwag mo silang i-force to just be, you know, be entrepreneurs on the land. Okay. Any other question? So some of the readings, no, in agrarian reform, if you, and I hope you still find time to read them, no, they may be a bit more technical. No? So I try to simplify them for you, try to summarize them for you. But if you really have time, no, it's a very interesting sector and topic. No? So I urge you to spend the time to read through it or watch the videos as well. I think there are some videos there. Okay. So we're done with agriculture and agrarian reform. So that's topic 1 under module 4. This one is a bit easier, no? But I hope you find it interesting because part of this really is demystifying debt. And especially now, no, a lot of the presidential candidates are talking about, laki ng debt. Ganito. So part of it really, what I want to do is to also demystify debt. All right, so just basic, no, going through it. So, you know, the main, no, I had another slide here and I forgot to copy paste it. So the main revenue source of government, of course, government, you want government to have resources, no, for services, for infra, etc. The main source of revenues for government is taxes, are taxes. And taxes, no, come in 2 ways, no, broadly speaking. No. So they can be direct taxes, no, or indirect taxes. No. It's tax season, by the way, no. Especially for us, no, who pay income tax, no, on an annual or quarterly basis. So April 15 yung deadline before Holy Week, no, or during Holy Week. Direct kasi is it's income tax, for example. No, what direct means is I need to compute for the tax I will pay government, and then I go to a bank or to BIR directly, no, to pay my share of tax. Indirect tax, for example, no, you go to McDonald's, you buy a burger, let's say 100 pesos to make it easier. No? Makikita nyo sa resibo, no, there's value added tax 12%. So 12 pesos out of that 100 peso burger, no, is value added tax. Now, I don't need to go to BIR just to pay that 12 pesos. No? By me buying that burger, I've already paid my share of value added tax. So that's indirect. By the mere action of buying something which already has the tax imputed in it, I'm already paying tax. Ang income tax kasi, ang direct taxes, I have to compute it, withdraw my money, or write a check just to pay that. Mas direct. Ito kasi, indirectly by purchasing something else that already has the tax. So those are the 2 broad categories of taxes. So I'm not sure if I still included this on Canvas. No? Just wanted to share with you some of the principles in terms of taxation that most countries should aspire for. Now, one is theoretical justice. Must be progressive. Basically, it's capacity to pay. No? To simplify, the more you have, the more you're taxed. The less you have, the less you're taxed. So for the taxation group, no, the train law group, no, whoever's doing that. So you see that, no, the government is aiming to be progressive, no. So yung mga minimum wage earners and up to a certain bracket, wala nang tax, 0%, no. The highest income bracket naman, mas tumaas, no, 35 or 40% tax na. So that's one example of progressive, no. The more you have, the more you're taxed. The more you're earning, the more you're taxed. Fiscal adequacy, the tax system should be sufficient so that it meets current and future needs, no, of the government, of the country. So for example, yung train, no, that was supposed to come up with resources for the infra build-up, diba? So part of it is allocated, earmarked for build. And of course, taxation should also be easy to administer. May joke nga before, no? Para, kasi in the olden days, now it's much simpler and easier. Online pa pwede magbayad. Before kasi, it was hard. No? There was a joke parang, oh, kami na nga magbabayad ng tax, pinapahirapan niyo pa kami. We're the ones giving you money and you're making it hard for us to give you money. Kasi dati, the rules were difficult, the paperwork was difficult, lots of papers, needed attachments, the lines were long, walang online, no? But now it's much easier. So that's the point, no? You want it to be administratively easy. Easy to implement, easy to follow. Not burdensome, transparent, and it's clear. Now it's down to 4 pages. Easy na lang, and you can pay online, which I do, no? Which I've started doing 2-3 years ago. I've started paying online. So very simple. Why is that important? That's important kasi if it becomes difficult for people to follow, one, they make mistakes. They might be paying lower taxes than they should be. Second, people will just say, wag na lang. Hindi ko kaya eh. Parang, and if BIR naman is not really serious in running after people, then wag na lang. Ang hirap eh. So the more easy it is, the more you can convince people to pay up. And you match that you also match that with enforcement mechanism. Kasi sa US, for example, the counterpart of BIR is the IRS, no, Internal Revenue System. Even if it's actually difficult to compute for your taxes, the paperwork is difficult. People are scared. They follow kasi the IRS will really hunt you down. So you can match that also with enforcement. And ito kasi, if it's unclear, no, you open up, there's more room for corruption. Not just income taxes, pero mga real property taxes. Kung hindi clear yon, then you can negotiate with the LGU, for example, or with BIR. Doon nangyayari yung mga under-the-table deals. So you want it clear, precise, easy, so not open to interpretation. So walang tawaran, no human contact. Boom, easy and less corruption. But finding the right level of tax rates, for example, whether that's 12% for VAT, 30% or 25% for income tax, personal or corporate tax, is easier said than done. So there's this thing called the Laffer curve, and I actually included a video from Laffer himself. It's hard to find the sweet spot. No? Parang, so what tax rate will you impose for the different tax brackets? No? So the concept is easy, but finding the sweet spot is difficult. So the concept, no, just to explain it. No? So what Laffer was saying, no, Mr. Laffer, I forget his first name, no? Basta Laffer na lang. He's basically saying, no, if the tax rate is 0%, then that's stupid. The government won't earn any money, obviously. Or if it's too low, they use less. Diba? If it's also too high, let's say 100% or less than, or almost 100%, government, kaya nga downward curve, no? It's a bell curve. No? Government will not also earn money. Bakit? If for example, no, people are working and then government decides 99% or 100% yung tax, I will not work na lang kasi whatever I earn, government gets. So kaya pabaliktad. No? The higher it is, it has a perverse effect. No? It has the negative. It will just backfire. So the optimal tax rate is somewhere in between. So, countries hire economists to study, simulate the effects. In France, for example, they're saying, it's close to 70%. 70% yata yung kanilang tax rate for the highest income earners. Pero sila naman, kasi they tax their citizens a lot, but they get good services. Kasi a lot of good free social services, healthcare, education, etc. So the point of the Laffer curve is, finding the sweet spot is somewhere in between zero. You can't put the tax rates too low because you'll miss out on revenues. You can also have a high tax rate because it will disincentivize work. and people giving taxes or paying taxes. So it's somewhere in between. Now, finding the sweet spot, that's a challenge to all policymakers. And you need to hire economists or statisticians to compute, simulate the effects. And they do that in countries. So that's finding the sweet spot. What are user fees now? Can anyone tell me? I don't know if some of you have gone through this in the module. What are user fees? How are they different from taxes? What are user fees? Anyone? There's a clue there, user fees. How are they different from taxes?
Sir, I think it's like a user fees, like you um like it's like you gain access to like a facility, right? Facility or service. Yeah.
Exactly. So you pay for for user fees, no? You pay for a direct specific benefit. Taxes kasi, once I part with my money, for the most part, the BIR gets to decide what to do with it. So they may put it into the 4-piece program and I won't benefit from that. So they decide. No? Walang specific benefit. But for user fees, no, you pay for a particular right, not right, a particular privilege. So, for example, the usual examples here are toll fees. So I pay to access that. No? If I'm not using SLEX or NLEX, then I will not pay it. So specific, yeah. I want a driver's license so I can drive. No? So I will pay the LTO fees, no, user fees to get a license, and then for the privilege, no, to drive. So those are user fees. So very easy to understand. So apart from taxes, user fees, no, there are other sources. One is tariffs. No? Tariffs are just taxes, no, but they are a special kind of tax. No? They are taxes on imports. So for example, you guys are using either a laptop, a tablet, or a phone when you're attending synchronous sessions. So when your parents or when you yourself paid, let's say, a company, an Octagon, for example, or whatnot, no, to buy that, no, part of it, part of your payment actually went into tariffs. No? Kasi in the Philippines, no, and most countries, no, imported goods are subject to taxes. They call them tariffs. There are many reasons why countries impose tariffs. Kasi one is, and for example, the rice tariffication law. No? One is so that for industries that we have right here, no, you don't get a glut of imports so that the local industry is driven out of business. The other is, of course, to earn revenues as well. So basically tariffs are taxes on imports. So it's not, it's not a small amount. No, the tariffs are also a significant part of government revenue. So I like using, for my classes, I like using pre-pandemic figures kasi mas ano yan, mas normal in a sense. No? So for example, if you compare in the last few years, no, pre-pandemic, no, they're represented by customs. Customs is the one that administers and collects tariffs. No? So kita nyo, no, it almost doubled more or less, no, or short of doubling. So and that's still i-divide nyo, that's still 1/5, roughly speaking, no, of the total revenues of government. Of course, the lion's share is still taxes, no? Pero tariffs, no, that BOC, Bureau of Customs collects, no, that's still sizable. No? At least in 2019, it accounted for a fifth. Diba? Dito before, almost a fifth also. So malaki. Malaki rin. So they're nothing to scoff at. Di sila baliwala. And another source is revenues from state-owned corporations. So the country, I think, the government has 50 plus government-owned and controlled corporations. So the difference between GOCCs or state-owned corporations, state-owned enterprises. GOCCs, government, it's an acronym that stands for government-owned and controlled corporations. What happens here is uh, what distinguishes them from their normal government agency like NEDA, they are a corporation, they can make money or lose money for that matter. So they are in a business. Sometimes they are a monopoly or sometimes they are one of the players in that sector. So there are 53, no? Both national and local state-owned corporations. No? For example, yung Land Bank, that's a government financial institution, DBP, NFA before, local water utilities, Philpost, the electric companies, no, the SAM, for example, wholesale energy, the government entity that runs and operates airports, CAAP, no, that's also a government entity. So what they do, no, with the profit that they earn, no, part of it they plow back to their operations, but part of it they remit to treasury. And that becomes part of the additional kitty or the additional money that government can spend. So not as big as tariffs and taxes, no, but still something. 69 billion, that's still something. So those are the different sources: taxes, user fees, tariffs, as well as dividends from the GOCCs. Mind you, not all GOCCs are income earning. No? Some of them, like some, no? Some is supposed to be a company dedicated to electricity generation. They've been in the red. No? They've been having deficits. So government naman, no, baliktad, no? Government through the GAA, no, through the budget, will have to subsidize naman the loss of some. So baliktad. So not all of them earn money. So now we go to government spending. What's the role of government spending? Why does government need to spend? One, of course, it's to provide for goods and services that people need. No? But if you also think about it, no, you guys are economics majors. You know the classic computation of GDP or GNP or GNI, no, which is C plus I plus NX plus G. No? Government can influence. No? And this is just this was a quarter, no, in 2020. No? This was the quarter when the Philippines experienced post-war. The Philippines experienced the largest contraction, di ba? Negative 16.7 yata, if I remember correctly. At that point, no, imagine nyo, no, all sectors, no, the C plus I plus NX, they all went down. Imagine nyo, no, ito by 50%. Government, on the other hand, no, it could have gone way below. It could have gone more than 16.7. No? Pero because of government spending, no, the ayudas, the infra, the additional support, no, the healthcare spending, no, it was positive. So in a sense, medyo na-mitigate, but not enough. So government, no, if you go by Keynes, no, can also be a force for improving the economy because they do buy things. No? So they spend and they also contribute to economic activity. And government spending, no, it's supposed to reflect priorities. So again, I use pre-pandemic budgets as my example kasi again, 2021 was a weird year because we had the pandemic. 2022 same, no, we were just getting out of the pandemic. The majority of the budget reflected pandemic related stuff. So I want to use pre-pandemic examples kasi mas normal yan. So government spending, no, is theoretically supposed to reflect priorities. That's why in 2022, there's a larger share going to health, for example. So here, what you see here, no, it reflects government's priority. You might be wondering, oh wow, okay pala, education is the number one priority of the government. No? Actually, there's a reason why education, DepEd, always gets the lion's share compared to the other agencies. It's written in the Constitution. If you don't know, no? It's written in the Constitution that education annually for all the annual budgets, no, the General Appropriations Act, no, that's the law that authorizes the budget. It says that education should be the most emphasized sector among all. That's why if you notice, if you read or open up all the past budgets, education, DepEd always gets the largest share. By ano yan? By intentional yan. But the funny thing here, no, given government's emphasis on the build the program, no, and infrastructure build up, you'll notice actually no, education doesn't get the largest share. It's actually infrastructure. Kasi, yes, DPWH is only second, but if you add DPWH, no, Public Works and Highways, plus transportation, then that's now larger than education. So if you really think about it, if you scratch beneath the surface, and again, government budget reflects, no, theoretically reflects priorities. So the Duterte administration, at least in 2020 and before, no, had the highest budget allocated for infrastructure. No? But it's not just this two, no? You add both of this, so that's what? That's almost 680 billion pesos. But education itself also has infrastructure, classrooms. Health has infrastructure spending. Agri as well, the farm to market roads, no, cold storage and whatnot. So it's your infrastructure, no, if you think about it, could have probably accounted for $1 trillion because all of the sectors also have their infra spending. And again, the point here is government spending budget is reflective more often than not of the priorities of the whoever's in power, the incumbent administration. Here's my question to you. No? There have been some criticism, especially in the beginning, about the build program, mabagal. They couldn't promise all of the infra they wanted. But why do you think, in theory, why is infrastructure build-up good? Why is it good? Or is it good? Why do you think? What do you guys think? Why is infrastructure build-up good? Or is it good or maybe bad? You might disagree with the statement.
Sir, I think that it's good because it reduces price discrepancy.
Price discrepancies?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How? How so?
For example, if there are a numerous number of products that are same products, but they have different price ranges, I think infrastructure buildup would have the ability to reduce those price discrepancies.
Yeah. Part of it also, you're right. No. Yeah. So, for example, using your idea. No? For example, if they're now able to connect, let's say Davao better, no, to Manila, kasi Davao or Mindanao is where most vegetables and agri products come from, or Baguio, for example. The Davao produce can now better compete with produce coming from Bulacan kasi the infrastructure is better, more efficient, ganun. Mind you, no, in the Philippines, infrastructure, logistics is a big problem. That's why a third of the costs, no, of the food that you eat, no, is allocated to shipping, expensive ang shipping and logistics. So that's good, no? And it can actually not just minimize price discrepancies, make goods more competitive wherever they come from within the country, no, it can also lead to lower prices, no, kasi if the infrastructure is better, no, it's what do you call this, for example, Baguio dati takes 6-7 hours, now it's down to 4 hours, less spoilage, less gas you need to use up, no, then the shipping cost can become lower, then the final price of the goods can become lower. So not only can it minimize the price discrepancy, it can even lead to lower prices for final goods. So let me just go through some, apart from what Dieter mentioned. That's a very good answer as well. One is there's a lot of infrastructure work, no? There's a direct increase in economic activity. So yon, diba? Construction sector, the manufacturing, it adds to the I part, for example, the G and the I part, for example. And you know, you employ a lot of people. The cement companies are happy. The restaurants around the construction sites. So a lot of economic activity just because of construction. So, for example, the Skyway when it was being built. Imagine how many people that employed. The suppliers that they needed for cement, for electricity, for tractors, for not tractors, for cranes, no, etc., etc. So ang dami, no? It's a direct increase, no, in economic activity. And there's indirect increase in economic activity. It facilitates trade, no. So more trade, no, it makes it easier. Farm to market roads, no, highways, no, it connects things, no. So you facilitate commerce, agribusiness. So factories can now easily ship it to final customers, no, or to malls here, no, outside. Kaya nga, if you notice, no, when the South Luzon Expressway was built, no, so companies now can locate in Laguna, no. Dati kasi Pasig yan, to be near to the market, to the final. Man, they're in Bulacan, they're outside Manila. Kasi they can do that cheaper yung land doon, and then the infrastructure can make it easy to facilitate that, no? That commerce, that trading, manufacturing outside also. So NEDA, no, pre-pandemic figures to, no, estimated an additional 1.3 trillion to GDP by 2022. And yan ang sinasabi ko, there are direct and indirect jobs, no, multiplier effect. So for example, again, yung Skyway 3, when it was being built, no, you had direct jobs. No? Pero the companies that were supplying things to them also had to hire people. No? So nag-boom yung business ng cement, ng mga hardware shops, etc., etc. And those indirectly, no, led to better, or they could have employed more people, no? Kasi they had to expand. So direct and indirectly creating more jobs. So, yun. That's the good thing about the build. So my critique of the build, they were too ambitious in the beginning, but medyo humabol naman sila towards the end. Of course, the major ones will not be completed by the end of this administration. That's not how infrastructure is supposed to be anyway. It will spill over to the next administration. But at least nagsimula na, no? The railways, the subway, etc., the new airports, etc., etc. Let me know if you have questions. So the next topic here is government spending and its fiscal policy can also influence people and companies, influence their behavior. It can disincentivize, it can also attract certain behaviors, both on an individual basis as well as, as well as corporations. So one, taxation policy can shape behavior. So for example, I don't know if you guys were able to attend my talk during the AEA DECA thing. So for example, the government, they wanted to earn more revenues. They wanted win-win solutions. So let's tax cigarettes higher, tsaka sugary beverages. So win-win yan because more taxes for government, and then it can try lang to curb behavior. No? Although there's some inelasticity, no, when it comes to those. Pero it can at the very least. No? Kasi dati when if you haven't tried smoking, don't try it. I used to be a smoker. I used to smoke a pack. It was hard to kick the habit. It's really a bad habit. So don't even think of starting it. During my time, I can buy a pack of cigarettes for less than 20 pesos. Dirt cheap, di ba? So now it's more, so maybe people will think twice about it, especially the poor, no, or buy less or smoke less. So at the very least, may konting behavior change. For the create law team, no, for example, it can try to incentivize the way you structure your taxes, lower taxes, for example, or zero taxes for a few years. It can attract, for example, investment from outside. So many times government, the policy, the way they do fiscal policy, fiscal, by the way, sorry if you don't know the term, fiscal lang naman has to do with government revenues, um, taxation, or getting more money or spending money. Both sides, no? Getting money, earning money, and spending money. That's fiscal. Um, simply speaking. So the way they do their taxation policy or spending policy sometimes, apart from earning revenues, they also try to change behavior. Ito naman, on the spending part, ito kasi it's the earning part, no, taxation policy. On the spending part, no, as I mentioned earlier, no, government spending can also help boost the economy. In Canvas, no, I shared a very quick thing about Keynes. No, Keynes is the father, as you guys know. Keynes is the John Maynard Keynes is the father of macroeconomics. No? He was a strong believer in government intervention, especially when the economy is in a slump. So Keynes, no, basically his premise was, there's a downturn, there's a slump, no. You create jobs for the people, no. You're not supposed to create jobs, so pero you create, let's say, a public infrastructure program or a cash for work program or something, no. Create a program so that people have money to spend. Yun nga, parang there was a joke, no, that Keynes before said, no, to boost the economy, government can pay people to dig holes in the ground and fill them up. Kahit hindi pa sira yung kalsada, sirain, and then, so because it can provide employment. So people have money to spend, and the money that they spend, can help the shops stay afloat, and then they can hire more workers or retain workers. So very good, virtuous cycle sana. But the problem is, during the pandemic, this is more muted. The ayuda that government provided was more muted kasi in the first place, mobility was restricted. The Keynes theory is more applicable when when people are free to go around. So during the pandemic, of course, it still helped stimulate the economy, still help people get more money, but more muted. So that's fiscal policy for you. Government doesn't just decide to come up with policies on taxation and spending, just to get money or to spend money. Sometimes they want to spur certain behavior, curb, incentivize, or in the case of spending, boost the economy, so that businesses are better able to stay afloat. That's good for employment. Ito, one of the last topics before we end tonight. Demystifying debt. You see this, and this came out just a few weeks ago. Wow, 12 trillion pesos. Grabe, by the year end, 13 trillion. Grabe, ang laki. Diba, you've heard, uso dito yung yung apo ng apo ninyo will still have to pay back the loans. So my question to you, are loans bad? Is debt bad? Do countries having debt, is that bad? What do you guys think? Is that bad? Are loans bad? Anyone? What are your thoughts? Even if you haven't enough. Depends. Oh, Jack, depends on what?
Depends on what is the debt and loans being used for.
Sorry, can you speak
Sorry po, am I choppy po?
medyo?
I'll just chat it po na lang.
Sige, go ahead. We'll wait for you. We'll hold our breath. I think you're on the right track. So it depends. Okay, depends on what? Let's wait for Jack. Loans and debts are good if they're used for infrastructure projects and improving the well-being and welfare of the people. Yes, that's one side of the equation. Yes, if it's bad if it's used for corruption. That's correct. That's absolutely correct. But the mere level of debt, no, some people kasi are complaining, sobrang dami na ng debt, etc., etc. So we'll discuss that. On the one hand, you are right, no, but that refers to the spending part. But the accumulation of debt, I want to demystify that. So let's have a simple analogy. You have two people, no, Mario and Maria. So sabi nila girls are now more successful than guys. So for example, Mario is only earning 15,000 a month and Maria is earning 100,000 a month. Imagine if both of them, no, for example, just assume, no, the bank, no, agreed to lend them 120,000 pesos. So they're supposed to pay, kunyari, zero interest. Just to simplify things. They're supposed to pay the bank 10,000 pesos per month. So if you think about it, for Mario, that represents 2/3. Medyo malaki, no, of his income. For Maria, it only represents 10%. So obviously, who will have a harder time paying the loan? It's Mario. So the point here is, one, it depends, no? It depends on the income that you have. So if you divide it, 10% lang to, no? So Maria is more than capable. So that is not bad, no? Mali mo, she needed something, no? Ito, for example, your parents, no, could not have bought the house you're staying in if not for loans or even cars, no? Except kung mayaman na mayaman talaga kayo. Kasi rarely can anyone come up with, let's say, 5 million or 10 million right off the bat. So loans inherently are not bad. And yung point ni Jack, especially if they're used for the right things, with a good purpose. So, and again, it depends on your income. Loans become only bad, no, or unmanageable if you're not able to pay for it. So that is okay as long as you are in a good position to pay it off. Look here. So, yun, no? So I wanted a simple analogy, the debt to income ratio. Same thing with the macro picture. No? For a country, there's what you call the debt to GDP ratio. No? So government debt as a share of GDP. Sayang talaga, no? We were really doing well before the pandemic. No? There were some reforms during the tail end of the Arroyo administration, more reforms during the Aquino administration. So our debt to GDP ratio, no, the smaller the better, di ba? You want debt as a proportion of your income. Remember, GDP lang naman can be output, can also be income. No? So the debt to GDP ratio of the Philippines has been continuously going down. We actually reached record low levels in 2019, if you look at the chart. But the pandemic happened, government had to spend left and right, ayuda this, ayuda that, healthcare, and some would say, no, may pharmacy corruption going on, no? So that added further. No? So now it went up, it shot up to 55%, and now we're in that territory. 60%, no, that's what the international experts are saying as the sort of warning territory. Okay pa, but that's a warning territory. So if you think about it, no, sina Governor Jokno of the Bangko Sentral, no, keep saying manageable pa. Well, it is, no. Wag lang lalampas pa beyond, no, far beyond 60%. The good thing is, come 2021, tail end of that, and 2022, mukhang recovery na tayo. So, numerator, denominator, di ba? So, our denominator, GDP, no, will keep improving na ulit. Then debt siguro, we're done borrowing so much na, you will expect this to go down in the coming years. So we are still in a good place. So don't believe people say na grabe na, sobra na, no? It's not absolute terms, no? Don't use absolute. Again, for your assignments, CBMS, any SOCSI indicator, usually you don't use absolute figures. You have to make it relative to something. Ito, for example, you don't know what 10,000 a month represents in terms of loans. Then you have to compare it with the capacity to pay. That's why you compare it with something which is salary. Same thing with this. Same thing with debt. The capacity to pay is this is the indicator as a function of GDP. No? Developed countries have larger debt to GDP ratios. The US and Singapore, they're more than 100%. Pwede yon kasi you can program naman the debt. It's total debt kasi you can program the debt to be paid at a later date. The debt to GDP lang naman is the total debt. Doesn't mean you have to pay everything in 1 year. Kaya nga, some countries go beyond. No? Japan for some time was 150%, 200%. Pwede naman. But the 60 is sort of the warning level. Pag mga 75 and ano, yun medyo delikado na talaga. It may become more unmanageable. So again, that is okay as long as you're in good position. So don't mind the absolute levels, the figures. Mind the ratios. So we're still in a good place. So that is demystifying debt. And to prove it, to prove that debt in the Philippines is still sustainable, we have a concept called credit rating. Credit rating can be given, no? I-rate ka na, parang may score ka. No? Credit rating or scores can be given to countries, companies, even to individuals. No? In the US, and we're slowly adopting this in the Philippines. In the US, whenever you go to a bank, you try to apply for a loan, they compute your credit score, no? How risky you are, no? Whether you're the higher the better. Same with countries, no? The credit watchers, so there are the big three, no? Fitch, Moody's, and Standard and Poor's, no? Meron din yung mga some boutique ones like the Japan JRC or something. They've all actually they've all increased, no? In the last few years, they've improved, no? They've even increased our credit rating, no? And during the pandemic, even if we reach 60%, no? They still maintained our credit rating. Ibig sabihin, yun, that's proof that we are in a good place, that we are not a risky borrower. What's the benefit of being considered a non-risky borrower? The interest on loans, no, will be lower. Kasi the more risky you are, no, ask your parents, no, kasi they've incurred loans in the past, no, the more riskier you are or you are perceived, the higher the interest. So the good thing is if you are seen as low risk, no, low risk of defaulting, no, mas mababa yung cost of borrowing, lower interest rate. So, you know, don't take my word for it, no, that we are in a good place, no, but take the word of the credit ratings agencies. They've still maintained our credit rating as above investment grade. Meaning, sige, borrowers, just lenders keep lending to the Philippines. Low risk sila. That's what it just means. So to end this demystifying topic, what do you think of this? No, I saw this last year, no, and it's no longer much in the news. No, there is this organization called FDC. No, they were saying, "Oh, NGO, you urge the president. This NGO urged presidential candidates to support cancellation of debt." Before we wrap up, what do you think of that? What do you think of that proposal? Good, excellent, bad, pwede na? What do you guys think before we end? Anyone, what do you think? Good idea, bad idea, you don't know what? Okay lang? No one? Gutom na? Sige, ako na lang. All right, you guys are probably shy, no, or still thinking. It's, in all honesty, it's a wrong proposal. Kasi one, again, as we've discussed, no, debt is not inherently bad. Even the likes of Ramon Ang to build San Miguel Airport, they need to borrow money. The Ayalas, the corporations, they need to borrow money. The important thing is you borrow for an intended purpose, and you can still borrow if it's still manageable. And we've shown that it's manageable pa naman. When you cancel debt, the problem is then your credit risk, no, that your credit rating will now be perceived as much, much lower kasi no one will want to lend to you anymore. Diba? And countries, not even developed ones, they need to keep borrowing. So that's kind of stupid proposal. Diba? You cannot cancel that kasi, well, one, that's a contract. No? Panindigan mo, one. The second, on the practical side, no one will let you borrow anymore. No? If you do this, or with super high interest rates in the future. So that's just wrong. So again, debt is not bad as long as you can manage it, you can pay it back, it's sustainable, those things. And if you, going back to what Jack mentioned, if you're really borrowing for a valid purpose, whether you're a country or a family, your parents will definitely borrow for something important. So that is not inherent. Okay, any other questions? I don't see any questions. So thank you guys. Now we're a small group. I hope you can encourage more of your classmates to join us next time. I was thinking of doing things to incentivize, but I don't want to force people just to grade things or mga quizzes. Ayoko yon, just to force people. I want people to come to class because they're interested. But I hope you guys can encourage your classmates to attend. I know this is not a major course, so it's lower in your priority, but still, okay lang. I don't take offense naman. So again, thank you very much. Again, there's a small core of you that really attend. Most likely, all of you will get automatic 20% just for fully participating in our classes. That's good incentive. So again, maraming salamat. Have a good dinner, guys. Have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you,
Maraming
sir.
salamat.
Thank you, sir.
Have a great evening.